The next type of biodiversity we'll talk about is species diversity. And this is probably what you guys think of. When we say, oh, there's a variety in life, you're like, oh yeah, there's birds and there's plants and there's fungi. And when it comes to conservation, this is pretty much what we think of as well. Can we protect the panda? Can we protect the giant redwoods? If we look around the world, there's about 1.74 million species identified and given names. If you look at this graph, I am not going to ask you exact numbers on this graph, but you can see a breakdown of all the living things that we know about on Earth. Here's how that is broken down. We have over 4,000 bacteria species. We have nearly 1 million insects, all by themselves, nearly 1 million of our insects. If you think about humans and other organisms with a backbone, we're pretty small. We're at like 45,000. So we're actually kind of small compared to a lot of other categories. Now, although we think there's about 1.74 million, or we know there's 1.74 million, we think there's actually a lot more than that. We think there's about 9 million species. So we have still left to discover 7 million species around the world. Now you might be wondering, how do we get that number? Where did this 9 million come from? It actually comes from some studies that are probably no longer legal now, but they're fascinating studies. So in the tropical rainforest, what some researchers did is they would look at just a single tree. And underneath that tree, they would lay out a really large tarp. And then what they would do with this tree is they would spray poison up this tree. Again, probably illegal to do today, particularly in the tropical rainforest, but this is what they did. And you can only imagine if you're going to spray poison up a tree, it's probably going to kill things in that tree. Now, things like birds or primates, things like that, probably really weren't affected, or they started smelling it and they started moving away. But this really helped us kill insects and to identify insects. So they sprayed this poison up this tree, and then what you would start seeing, and that's what these green dots are representing, you started seeing insects falling dead off this tree onto this tarp. And after a certain amount of time that all of these insects are dying and falling off, then what these researchers would do is they would go through all the insects on this tarp and they'd be like, wow, we haven't seen this one before. Let's take it back and catalog it. And, haven't seen this one before. Let's take it back and catalog it. And, oh, this one, okay. No, we know what that is. That's a common beetle. And, oh, look at this is brand new and this is brand new. And so they would do this to tons of trees and see like, wow, here's what we do know and here's what we don't know. And so then we extrapolated out. We said, okay, if we know 1/10 of all these insects, then maybe of all the animals we know in the world, we only know 1/10 of them. We are finding new organisms every single day in the deep oceans. The deep oceans are largely unexplored. Scientists think that we have only explored about 1% of the oceans in general. That should make sense. I mean, the oceans take up a majority of Earth, and there's so many things living down there, and we just don't know about it because we're still exploring it. So I mentioned these numbers. One, you should know these numbers, but two, it's just really think of the immensity of the life that is out there. You can probably name 100 different animals right now, and that is barely scratching the surface. One last thing, I've already mentioned it, but just so that you have this as an actual note, insects rule the world. They outnumber us by so much, not just number of species, but actual number of organisms as well. Part of it has to do with the fact that they can evolve very quickly, and because of that, we see a great diversity. It's really just kind of an interesting fact, and even of those 9 million that we think exist, we still think it's mostly insects. It's not like, oh, we still have 1 million different fish species to discover. We think it's pretty much insects. And then last but not least, looking at ecosystem diversity. So ecosystem diversity is exactly what it sounds like. It's the diversity of the ecosystems around the world. Remember, ecosystems are a blend of the living and non-living world, and kind of the interaction that exists between them. Now, the reason we have different ecosystems, the reasons we have deserts and rainforests and the coldest areas on Earth is because of climate. And the reason we have different climates is really having to do with how far Earth is, Earth's tilt. You can take an actual Earth science class and you learn all about that. We're not going to talk about it, but just know some places on Earth are naturally cold. Some places on Earth are naturally hot. And that's going to make different ecosystems. Now, what's important about ecosystems is the ecosystem tells us how many species there will be, or how much variety in species there will be. If I said, are there more species in a tropical rainforest than in Antarctica? You don't even need to do research on that. You can probably very easily tell me, oh, tropical rainforest. If I said here in Maryland versus Antarctica, you'd probably say Maryland. We're warmer. When you're warmer, there's more food. If there's more food, there's more things to eat that food. So ecosystems are incredibly important because they kind of dictate the species that are in them and the number and the variety of species that are in them. We can kind of say that this bullet point that just came up is that ecosystems are a driver of species diversity. Tropical rainforests have such a high biodiversity because they have so many resources. The ecosystem dictates species. It's not the other way around. It's not like all these species got together and they're like, hey, let's make a rainforest. It's the other way. Ecosystems come first. You have a healthy ecosystem. You have a productive ecosystem. You're going to have tons of species and healthy species. So with that said, I think it's a probably fair statement to say that we as humans, should be protecting the ecosystem level. If we can protect a tropical rainforest, then we're protecting the thousands, if not millions of species that exist in that ecosystem. But we don't. Yeah, well, I shouldn't say we don't. We kind of don't. You've seen ads about protecting the rainforest, but most of the things that are happening in the world are actually geared towards species diversity. It's actually looking at, well, let's save the panda, right? Let's save sea otters. Let's save polar bears. Great. But if I were to protect that bamboo forest that pandas exist in, not only would I be saving pandas and protecting their habitat, but I would also be preserving the diversity that exists in that bamboo forest. Maybe there is an endangered beetle in that forest. You're probably not going to see big old posters that say, hey, protect the bamboo shiny beetle. People don't care about that, right? Shiny beetles, maybe they're shiny, but people don't get passionate about that. Pandas, though, you go to the zoo to see pandas. When the 2 pandas were born at the Smithsonian Zoo, it was like a big thing around the world. We get excited about pandas, we don't get excited about beetles. And so by protecting at the ecosystem level, we're protecting many species. The species that people really, really care about, and maybe the species people don't care about. In our next unit or next lecture, we'll talk about the importance of biodiversity and why protecting that shiny bamboo beetle is also important, just as important, maybe even more important than protecting the panda. So I'm going to leave you with this thought that you should really, really ponder, is that if conservation efforts should be at the ecosystem level, if we can do more good protecting the ecosystem, why don't we? Why do most of our conservation efforts, why do most of our money, our tax dollars, why does most of it go to the species level? Why are we protecting the hippos and the lions and developing zoos to protect the prairie dog and building aquariums to protect X, Y, and Z? Why are we protecting the organism and not the ecosystem? So I'm going to leave that with you guys. So let's just do a quick summary. So this whole lecture was just about what is biodiversity, what do we mean by biodiversity, as well as the different levels of biodiversity. We looked at genetic diversity in a population, using mice as an example, but this is also what caused the Great Potato Famine, was a lack of that genetic biodiversity. We learned that insects rule the world when it comes to species diversity, and that there's still many more species to learn about and to discover. And then finally, we pondered about ecosystem biodiversity and how it's so important for driving species diversity, even though we don't really think about how do we protect ecosystems versus species. So with that, I'm going to leave you guys to our next video series to take a look at why does biodiversity matter? How does it benefit humans?